in the tranquil embrace of Evergreen Heights, a community where lives unfolded with predictable rhythms, Sarah Jenkins epitomized the promise of youth and ambition. Her days were a tapestry of creative endeavors and cherished connections, her future bright and unblemished. Yet even in the most idyllic settings, the human heart can harbor shadows, and the closest bonds can conceal the deepest deceptions. It is a chilling paradox that sometimes the greatest threats emerge from the most trusted circles. When the ordinary morning routine of a vibrant young woman abruptly vanished, replaced by the unsettling silence of an unanswered call, a subtle discord echoed through the quiet streets. A seemingly mundane alibi offered solace, suggesting a simple misunderstanding, a brief lapse in communication. But what if the very fabric of that alibi was woven with falsehoods? What sinister truth could lie hidden behind a casual claim of oversleeping? Evergreen Heights, a community cradled by rolling hills and punctuated by the neat, inviting lines of suburban homes, often felt immune to the broader world's clamor. It was a place where routines were etched into the very fabric of daily life, where sun-drenched mornings typically unfolded with predictable tranquility. For 24-year-old Sarah Jenkins, a gifted graphic designer whose ambition was as boundless as her spirit, these mornings were a prelude to a day filled with creative challenges and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. She had recently embarked on her dream career, settling into a vibrant new apartment she shared with Mark Peterson, a childhood friend whose presence offered a comforting link to her past. Sarah's world was rich with close-knit family ties, her sister Emily a constant confidant, and a future shimmering with possibility. Then one Tuesday, the seamless rhythm of her existence fractured. Her supervisor, Eleanor Vance, noted Sarah's uncharacteristic absence from the morning stand-up meeting. A quick call to Sarah's cell phone went directly to voicemail, an anomaly for a woman known for her meticulous punctuality and professional dedication. Eleanor's initial concern deepened into a genuine alarm. She tried Mark Peterson, Sarah's roommate, for an explanation. That call, like Sarah's, met only silenced the unanswered ring, echoing Eleanor's growing apprehension. The professional anxiety in the office sharpened quiet dread, replacing the morning's calm. Miles away, Emily Jenkins felt a cold dread begin to coil in her stomach. Sarah's phone had been silent all morning, an unusual occurrence for sisters who spoke multiple times a day. Emily, her thumb hovering over the dial icon, tried Mark Peterson's number a second time, but again he was unreachable. Sarah was larger than life. Emily would later recount her voice, thick with the dawning realization that her sister's vibrant world might have been violently disrupted. The abrupt cessation of Sarah's routine, a sudden void in the fabric of an ordinary day, cast a chilling shadow over the familiar landscape of Evergreen Heights. It was more than a missed meeting. It was a profound absence, an insistent silence that spoke volumes. The town, once basking in its quiet normalcy, now held its breath, sensing a narrative that had veered sharply into the unknown. A vibrant life, extinguished or hidden, demanded an explanation, hinting at a truth far darker than any could imagine. The relentless silence from her sister's phone had become a cold, tightening knot in Emily Jenkins' chest. Unable to push back the rising tide of panic, she bypassed frantic phone calls and drove straight to Sarah's apartment in Evergreen Heights. The drive felt unnaturally long, each mile filled with imagined scenarios, none of them offering solace. Her knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. a silent, desperate battle against the dread that now held her in its grip. Upon arrival, the front door to Sarah's unit stood slightly ajar. Emily's breath hitched a sharp intake of fear. A rush of still, cool air, carrying a faint, generic scent of apartment disinfectant greeted her. Inside the apartment was meticulously neat, every cushion aligned, every surface gleaming. It was a testament to Sarah's organized nature, yet this very order felt unnerving, almost too perfect in its undisturbed state. There were no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, just an echoing emptiness that amplified Sarah's inexplicable absence. Emily's voice, a desperate whisper, carried through the quiet rooms. "Sarah, are you here?" Only silence answered, vast and heavy. From a back bedroom, Mark Peterson, Sarah's roommate, and a familiar face from their childhood eventually emerged. He blinked slowly, his hair tousled, his movements sluggish, as if roused from an unseasonably deep sleep. A faint stubble shadowed his jaw. He squinted at Emily, a vague disorientation clouding his features. "Emily, what's wrong?" he mumbled, his voice thick with slumber. He listened, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, as Emily, her words tumbling out in a rush of anxiety, explained Sarah's uncharacteristic disappearance. Mark offered his version of events. "Oh man, I must have completely overslept. Sarah usually leaves super early, so I just assumed she'd already gone to work. We had a pretty chill night. She came home late from dinner with some friends, said goodnight, and I just crashed." His account was utterly mundane, unremarkable in its details. Yet his almost detached calm felt jarring against Emily's raw, palpable distress. A flicker of something too quick to grasp passed over his eyes before he settled into an expression of shallow, almost perfunctory concern. "Have you tried her friends? Maybe she went to her mom's." Emily watched him, a prickle of unease sharpening into a distinct suspicion. His eyes, though seemingly focused, held a guarded quality she couldn't quite place. The distinct lack of genuine urgency in his voice, juxtaposed with the unlocked door, and Sarah's complete vanishing act, struck a profoundly discordant note. His story, presented with such simplicity, began to feel too convenient, too polished in its lack of spontaneous detail. With a heavy heart and a mind now swirling with far more questions than answers, Emily knew their options had narrowed. The police had to be called. A missing persons investigation, a process fraught with uncertainty and chilling dread, was about to begin. The arrival of the first patrol cars, their lights strobing in the pre-dawn gloom, fractured the quiet illusion of Evergreen Heights. Urgent streaks of blue and red momentarily painted the manicured lawns and neat facades of Sarah Jenkins' apartment complex. Uniformed officers, their expressions etched with procedural gravity, moved with measured purpose, a stark contrast to the growing frantic energy emanating from Emily Jenkins, who watched from the curb, tethered to a desperate hope. As they entered Sarah's apartment, the scene presented a confounding tableau. There were no splintered door frames, no shattered glass, no overturned furniture. The space was meticulously clean, almost pristine, an eerie echo of the order Sarah so diligently maintained. It was a domestic snapshot of normalcy, yet utterly devoid of the vibrant young woman it belonged to. This profound absence, more unsettling than any overt sign of violence, hung heavy in the air. Detective Sergeant Laura Hayes, a woman whose career was built on dismantling facades and uncovering hidden truths, stepped inside her presence, immediately establishing a quiet authority. A seasoned investigator with a reputation for an unwavering gaze, and an analytical mind, she surveyed the scene with an almost surgical detachment, her eyes systematically cataloging every detail. Alongside her, Detective Rob Miller moved with the same methodical precision, a silent, efficient extension of Hayes's investigative process. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, Sergeant. An officer reported, his voice low and factual, echoing through the unnervingly silent rooms. Hayes nodded, her expression unreadable. She motioned her team to begin the meticulous, almost archaeological process of searching. Every surface was dusted, every drawer opened and documented, every floorboard inspected. They worked against the invisible clock of a missing persons case, acutely aware that each passing minute could diminish Sarah's chances. They methodically cataloged Sarah's belongings, the still warm indentation on her unmade bed, a half-empty coffee cup on the kitchen counter, her work laptop still connected to its charger. Each item was a silent testament to a life abruptly interrupted, but none offered a clear path forward. There was no hastily scrawled note, no desperate plea, no message left behind to explain the sudden, terrifying void. Outside, Emily Jenkins paced, her raw, emotional panic, a stark counterpoint to the disciplined calm unfolding inside the apartment. Her brother David Jenkins held her tightly, his own face etched with a desperate hope, attempting to anchor her as the reality of Sarah's disappearance solidified into a crushing weight. They knew that behind the procedural calm of the officers lay an unspoken urgency and understanding that in cases like these, the lack of immediate answers could be as brutal as any overt act of violence. The apartment, so normal in its appearance, offered no immediate answers, baffling those tasked with deciphering its silent, chilling narrative. The initial missing person investigation in Evergreen Heights swiftly intensified, shedding its early procedural calm for a sharper, more focused scrutiny. Detective Sergeant Laura Hayes and her partner Detective Rob Miller initiated a series of formal interviews, meticulously gathering every scrap of information that could illuminate Sarah Jenkins' last known movements. The first individual requiring a comprehensive statement beyond the brief interaction at the apartment was Mark Peterson. Seated opposite Detectives Hayes and Miller in the sterile confines of the interview room, Mark Peterson repeated his account, his demeanor remarkably composed. His gaze, steady yet somehow vacant, met theirs as he recounted the evening. Like I told Emily, I just crashed out early. Sarah came home pretty late. I think she said she'd been out with friends. I just assumed she'd gone to work like normal when I finally woke up to Emily banging on the door. He painted a picture of a typical roommate dynamic, suggesting no friction, no unusual events beyond his deep sleep. His narrative mirrored his earlier statement, painting a picture of mundane normalcy, yet the very smoothness of its delivery, devoid of any genuine emotional texture, began to register as a subtle discordant note with Detective Hayes. But the veneer of Mark's simple alibi began to show its first hairline fractures almost immediately. A patrol officer canvassing the complex reported Sarah's silver Honda Civic remained in its parking spot. This tangible piece of evidence directly contradicted Mark's casual assumption that she had simply left for work. Then came the unexpected testimony from Mrs. Albright, an elderly neighbor living in the unit directly below Sarah and Mark's. Mrs. Albright was a meticulous observer of her surroundings, a woman who knew the routines of her building with startling accuracy. She reported distinctly hearing raised voices, a heated argument emanating from Sarah and Mark's apartment late the previous night, long after Mark claimed to have gone to bed. It wasn't just a friendly chat, Mrs. Albright insisted, her voice trembling slightly. It was loud. A man and a woman. It sounded like a fight. When confronted with Mrs. Albright's unshakable testimony, a subtle shift occurred in Mark Peterson. His previously calm facade fractured. A flicker of something unreadable tightened the skin around his eyes. His denial was immediate, almost reflexive. No, that's impossible. We didn't fight. I was asleep. She must have misheard, or maybe it was another apartment. The words tumbled out, laced with a new defensive urgency. Detective Hayes, her gaze unwavering, absorbed these emerging contradictions. Her years of experience had honed her intuition, teaching her to identify the subtle shifts in narrative, the small, undeniable pieces of evidence that spoke louder than any rehearsed statement. Mark's carefully constructed alibi, once a seemingly solid structure, now showed critical stress points. The tranquil image of a sleeping roommate dissolved under the weight of these accumulating red flags. Sarah's stationary car, the neighbor's unsettling account, these were not isolated anomalies. They were clear indications that the narrative presented to them was a deception. The investigative momentum shifted perceptibly, transforming a baffling missing persons case into something far more insidious, driven by the deepening certainty that Mark Peterson held the key to a truth he desperately wanted to keep buried. The investigation into Sarah Jenkins' disappearance, already fraught with gnawing suspicion, now pivoted sharply. Recognizing Mark Peterson's alibi had dissolved under the weight of witness testimony and physical discrepancies, Detectives Hayes and Miller turned their focus to the silent digital witnesses of modern life. A meticulously prepared warrant was swiftly secured, granting law enforcement access to the phone records of both Sarah and Mark. This access marked a critical juncture, a foray into the unseen currents of data that often held truths more concrete than any verbal account. While Sarah's phone offered no new clues, Mark's device immediately became the focal point of the forensic examination. He had vehemently claimed to be deep in sleep during the crucial overnight hours when Sarah vanished, oblivious to any events. Yet digital activity rarely aligns with convenient narratives. Forensic specialists, working with meticulous precision in a quiet lab, began to peel back the layers of his online life, systematically charting his every interaction. The results were immediate and startling. Mark Peterson's phone had been anything but dormant. Text messages were sent and received in the early hours of the morning, long after his claimed bedtime. Social media applications had been actively accessed, scrolled through, and updated. These were not the passive traces of a profound slumber. They were the clear, conscious actions of someone fully awake and actively engaged with their device. This digital heartbeat flatly contradicted every word of his alibi. But the most damning revelations emerged from the intricate web of location data. Cell tower pings and Wi-Fi access logs meticulously analyzed painted an inescapable picture of Mark's physical movements. During the precise window when Sarah was believed to have disappeared, his phone was not only actively online, but demonstrably in motion. The data placed his device not innocuously within his own bedroom, but in the immediate vicinity of Sarah's room. Later in the dark, pre-dawn hours, the location pings showed his phone moving not merely within the apartment, but outside the complex, traveling a short distance before returning. This was the undeniable turning point. Digital forensics had become the cold, impartial arbiter of truth, presenting an objective, irrefutable timeline that shattered Mark Peterson's carefully constructed narrative. The sophisticated tools of the modern age had exposed a lie with stark, incontrovertible facts, transforming a baffling missing person case into something far more sinister. The question was no longer simply where Sarah Jenkins was, but instead what Mark Peterson had done, a terrifying implication, now laid bare by the relentless gaze of technology. The sterile hum of the fluorescent lights in the interrogation room pressed down, amplifying every subtle sound. Mark Peterson, summoned for a second interview, entered with a practiced air of wary cooperation. He still presented the persona of the concerned, slightly put-upon roommate, his movements calm, his gaze unwavering, as he took the seat opposite Detective Sergeant Laura Hayes and Detective Rob Miller. The stark room, devoid of warmth or distraction, became a crucible for the truth. Detective Hayes began with a measured, almost conversational tone, leaning slightly forward. "Mark, thank you for coming in again. We just need to clarify a few things from your earlier statement. You mentioned you went to bed early that night, completely unaware of Sarah's movements until Emily arrived. Correct? She offered him an open door, a final chance to reiterate his carefully constructed alibi." Mark nodded, his composure unwavering. "That's right, Detective. I was out cold. Didn't hear a thing after Sarah came home and said goodnight. Woke up when Emily was at the door, panicked." His voice remained even a testament to his ingrained self-control, yet the lack of genuine color in his retelling felt increasingly rehearsed. Detective Hayes allowed the silence to stretch, her gaze steady before she gently pushed a manila folder across the table. It contained printouts of phone records, timestamps, and intricate diagrams of cell tower pings. "We appreciate your cooperation, Mark. But sometimes people leave behind an electronic trail, and that trail often illuminates a very different story." Mark's eyes flickered down to the documents, a barely perceptible tightening around his jaw. He feigned a casual indifference, but the shift was undeniable. Detective Hayes continued, her voice losing its initial softness, now imbued with the weight of unassailable facts. "Your phone, Mark, was actively used during the hours you claimed to be deep in sleep. Text messages sent at 2:17 a.m. Social media applications accessed at 3:05 a.m. These aren't the actions of someone out cold, are they?" Mark's carefully maintained composure began to fracture. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his previous calm replaced by a nervous agitation. A forced, unconvincing scoff escaped him. I'm a heavy sleeper, Detective. Maybe I was sleep texting, or, just tossing and turning, accidentally hitting buttons in the dark." His hands, once still, now moved restlessly, a clear tell of his growing discomfort. Detective Miller, who had largely been silent, interjected, his voice firm and cutting through Mark's flimsy excuses. "Sleep texting, a string of messages, Mark, and scrolling through Instagram that takes conscious intent." He then slid another sheet across the table, revealing a map dotted with precise location pings. "And this is where your memory truly diverges from reality. These pings show your phone, not in your bedroom, but moving through the apartment, specifically in the vicinity of Sarah's room. And later, outside the complex. At 4:38 a.m., your device was almost a mile away before returning at 5:01 a.m. The color drained from Mark Peterson's face, leaving it pale and drawn. His eyes, now wide, with a dawning terror, darted wildly between the detectives and the damning visual evidence. The carefully cultivated persona of the innocent cooperative roommate dissolved, completely replaced by open hostility and desperate denial. "That's impossible. The GPS must be wrong. I was in bed. I don't know who did this, but it wasn't me. I didn't leave the apartment. He slammed his fist onto the table, once a raw, uncontrolled burst of frustration. The room crackled with the electric tension of his collapsing lies, the chilling reality of the digital truth undeniable. He was truly cornered, his feeble explanations about accidental buttons and faulty GPS crumbling under the cold, hard weight of irrefutable data, leaving him exposed. Under the sustained, relentless pressure of the interrogation, Mark Peterson's carefully constructed narrative began to unravel with terrifying speed. His initial overslept alibi, already shattered by the undeniable phone data, gave way to a desperate scramble for a new explanation. His eyes, now bloodshot and darting, scanned the stark room as if searching for an escape route that did not exist. Okay, fine, Mark stammered, his voice losing its controlled inflection, replaced by a strained higher pitch. I wasn't asleep the whole time. But it wasn't what you think. I heard an argument. Sarah, she was with someone else. A guy I didn't recognize. They were really going at it, yelling in her room. He leaned forward, attempting to project a newfound vulnerability. I got scared, didn't want to get involved. So I left. Snuck out. Drove around for a bit to clear my head, then came back. I didn't want to tell you because it would look bad, like I was hiding something. But I swear I didn't see anything. I just heard them. This elaborate, new fabrication was delivered with a forced earnestness that barely masked his underlying fear. He painted a picture of himself as a reluctant witness, too intimidated to intervene, too fearful to speak. But detectives Hayes and Miller were seasoned veterans of such theatrical displays. They had seen this pattern before. When one lie collapses, a more convoluted one often takes its place, attempting to fill the void. Detective Hayes, her expression unyielding, leaned forward. So you heard argument, you were scared, and you left. Did you call 911? Did you text Sarah to ask if she was okay when you came back? Mark hesitated, his gaze dropping to the table. No, I just wanted to avoid trouble. I figured they'd sort it out. Detective Miller interjected, his voice sharp and direct. But your phone data confirms you drove a mile away, Mark. In the middle of the night. You didn't just drive around the block. And that data also shows you accessing social media and sending texts. Were you trying to contact this unknown third party? Mark's new narrative immediately crumbled under the weight of fresh inconsistencies. He could provide no identifying details for this supposed third party, no name, no description, no car, no plausible context for their argument. He claimed to have seen a shadowy figure leave, but his memory of their appearance was conveniently blank. The story he desperately tried to weave lacked any corroborating evidence, any shred of truth beyond his frantic, self-serving words. The battle of wits between the seasoned detectives and the deceptive suspect intensified. Detectives Hayes and Miller systematically dismantled each new claim, with logical questioning contrasting his evolving story with the cold, hard data they possessed. They picked apart his shifting timeline, the vagueness of his descriptions, the glaring absence of any supporting facts. Mark, caught in his own intricate web of deceit, grew increasingly agitated, his desperation hardening into thinly veiled hostility. He was no longer the calm, composed roommate. He was a man trapped, his every word deepening the pit he had dug for himself, exposing the chilling lengths he would go to escape the truth. As Mark Peterson's elaborate fabrications disintegrated under the relentless scrutiny of detectives Hayes and Miller, The true unsettling motive for Sarah Jenkins' disappearance began to emerge from the wreckage of his lies. His desperate attempts to deflect blame, to conjure an unseen third party, only served to highlight the chilling depth of his deception. The investigators, however, were not merely looking at the immediate untruths. They were re-examining Mark's entire relationship with Sarah, sifting through the seemingly innocuous details of their shared life for hidden malevolence. Through a combination of further investigation, including interviews with mutual friends and family, and a meticulous review of Mark's own subtle shifts in dialogue during his interrogations, a chilling picture began to form. Friends recounted instances where Mark had seemed overly possessive of Sarah, his dismissiveness towards her other romantic interests carrying a bitter edge. Casual remarks Sarah had made about Mark's clinginess or mood swings now resonated with a far darker significance. It became chillingly apparent that Mark had secretly harbored intense romantic feelings for Sarah, feelings that were profoundly unreciprocated, leaving a festering wound to his fragile ego. Compounding this simmering resentment was a more immediate volatile issue: Mark's hidden financial struggles. Detectives discovered a damning trail of overdue bills and maxed-out credit cards, a secret he had meticulously kept from Sarah. Sarah, known for her meticulous organization and open communication, had recently confronted Mark about his unpaid share of rent and utilities. She had likely discovered the true extent of his insolvency, a fact that would have been a humiliating blow to Mark's carefully constructed image of stability and control. The pieces clicked into place with a chilling finality. The loud argument Mrs. Albright had reported hearing late that night was not with an unknown third party. It was Sarah and Mark. The confrontation, sparked by Mark's financial deception and Sarah's definitive rejection of his undeclared affections, had violently escalated. In the quiet confines of their apartment, a place meant for friendship and shared dreams, a volatile mixture of hidden jealousy and financial desperation had tragically converged. Mark's carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of lies and unfulfilled desire, had been threatened, leading to a fatal confrontation that ended Sarah's vibrant life. This shocking revelation painted a stark picture of betrayal from within a darkness lurking beneath the surface of a seemingly ordinary friendship waiting to explode. Courtroom gallery, usually a place of quiet formality, now thrummed with a suppressed tension. Days blurred into weeks as the community of Evergreen Heights, still reeling from the shocking revelation of Mark Peterson's betrayal, watched with grim anticipation. The trial of Mark Peterson for the murder of Sarah Jenkins transcended mere legal procedure. It became a public dissection of the insidious way trust could curdle into deadly obsession, how familiarity could mask a predator. Each morning, seats filled rapidly, citizens, drawn by a morbid fascination with the destruction of a vibrant life and a horrifying unraveling of a once unquestioned friendship. District Attorney Eleanor Holloway, leading the prosecution, commenced her case with a precise and unflinching narrative. Her voice, calm, yet resonating with authority, painted a stark picture of calculated malice and an attempted cover-up. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began, her gaze sweeping across their faces. This case details the violent theft of Sarah Jenkins' life, not by a stranger, but by a man she knew, a man she lived with, a man who shared her home. It is about a meticulously spun web of lies designed to obscure a brutal truth, a truth ultimately illuminated by the impartial, unblinking eye of modern technology. She promised to expose Mark Peterson, driven by unrequited desire and desperate financial straits, as the architect of a false alibi undone by his own digital trail. The prosecution first called Sarah's friends and family, their testimonies heavy with a grief that time had done little to diminish. Emily Jenkins, her face a mask of profound sorrow, recounted the agonizing discovery of Sarah's absence, her mounting dread, and Mark's unsettlingly detached demeanor that fateful morning. Sarah was everything, Emily testified, her voice trembling but firm. She was my best friend, my rock. And then she was simply gone. David Jenkins, Sarah's father, spoke with quiet dignity of his daughter's boundless dreams, her ambition, and the gaping chasm her loss had left in their lives. Their poignant words established the immense human cost of the crime, providing the emotional bedrock for the prosecution's relentless pursuit of justice. The heart of the prosecution's case solidified with Detective Sergeant Laura Hayes on the stand. Her presence exuded quiet competence, her testimony delivered with the detached clarity of one who had meticulously pieced together an intricate, gruesome puzzle. She methodically guided the jury through the initial missing person report, the seemingly pristine apartment that yielded no immediate clues, and Mark Peterson's initial placid alibi that he had overslept, utterly oblivious to Sarah's movements. Then, with the aid of large illuminated screens, Detective Hayes introduced the irrefutable phone data. She explained with an expert's precision the process of obtaining search warrants and how forensic analysts extracted the digital essence of Mark's activities. The defendant, Mr. Peterson, asserted he was asleep during the hours Sarah Jenkins disappeared, Detective Hayes stated, her voice steady. However, the digital evidence reveals an entirely different scenario. She presented a timeline stark and undeniable, detailing text messages sent and received by Mark's phone at 2:17 a.m., social media accessed at 3:05 a.m., actions that flatly contradicted his claim of being out cold. The visual representation of cell tower pings then illuminated the most damning truth: Mark's phone, and by extension, Mark himself, was not in his bedroom. It tracked movement within the apartment, specifically around Sarah's private space, before exiting the complex at 4:38 a.m. and returning at 5:01 a.m. These electronic movements, Hayes articulated, directly refute every statement Mr. Peterson made regarding his whereabouts that night. During cross-examination, the defense attorney Julian Vance, a sharp but often theatrical lawyer, vigorously attempted to undermine Hayes's testimony. Detective Hayes, Vance, began, his voice laced with skepticism. Is it not plausible that these pings are inaccurate, that technology, much like human memory, can be fallible? Could Mr. Peterson not have been sleep texting, as he suggested, or simply misremembering the exact time? Detective Hayes met his gaze with an unyielding calm. While no technology is absolutely infallible, Mr. Vance, the aggregation of data, text logs, social media access records, and multiple location pings from distinct cell towers presents a consistent, active pattern of use. It would require an extraordinary, indeed impossible, series of coincidences for Mr. Peterson to sleep text coherent messages and simultaneously generate a false travel path consistent with his phone being carried from the apartment. Her answers remained unwavering, anchored in established procedure and forensic fact, leaving no substantive room for Vance's speculative doubts. Further prosecution witnesses solidified the unfolding narrative. A forensic analyst detailed the granular precision of phone data, emphasizing its reliability. Mrs. Albright, the elderly neighbor, provided poignant testimony, recalling the distinct heated arguments she heard, firmly identifying the voices as a man and a woman, and confirming the precise timing. Friends of Sarah provided emotional insights into Mark's subtle possessiveness and Sarah's increasing discomfort, painting a picture of a strained relationship underlying their surface camaraderie. The defense, facing a mountain of digital and circumstantial evidence, visibly shifted its strategy, pivoting from outright denial to an attempt at damage control. They aimed to humanize Mark, portraying him as a panicked individual who made poor choices under immense stress. Their most crucial move was to put Mark Peterson on the stand. Mark, now noticeably thinner and appearing profoundly stressed, took the stand. Under direct examination from Julian Vance, he offered what the prosecution would later brand a performative, disingenuous apology. His voice, now softer, almost sorrowful, carried through the hushed courtroom. I just want to say I am so truly sorry for everything. For the pain I've caused Sarah's family. I wish I could go back and change that night. He then reiterated a modified version of his second alibi, claiming he did hear an argument, but still with an unknown third party admitting he left out of fear and panic, not malice. He attempted to subtly tarnish Sarah's image, suggesting she might have been involved in things he didn't quite understand, striving to minimize his own actions by implying some mysterious external factor. I didn't know what to do, he pleaded, his voice cracking. I was terrified. I just froze. I panicked. I just wanted to get away from the yelling, from whatever was happening in Sarah's room. But the true test came during cross-examination. District Attorney Holloway, her tone now sharper, began to systematically dismantle his carefully rehearsed performance. Mr. Peterson, she began, her voice cutting, you claim you were terrified and panicked, correct? Yes, absolutely, Mark replied, nodding earnestly, though his eyes darted nervously. So terrified, Holloway continued, her voice dripping with incredulity, that instead of calling 911 when you heard what you describe as a violent argument in your own apartment, you simply left, and during this alleged panic, you managed to send text messages, access social media, and drive almost a mile away, only to return as the sun was rising. Mark stammered his composure once again, fracturing under the relentless questioning. I wasn't thinking straight. It was a blur. Holloway pressed on, yielding. A blur, Mr. Peterson, that your phone data recorded with remarkable clarity. You lied to the police, didn't you, Mr. Peterson? You lied to Sarah's family. You lied about being asleep. You lied about a phantom third party. And now you are lying about your panic to this jury, attempting to deflect blame from the undeniable truth that you murdered Sarah Jenkins. Mark's face contorted in a mixture of anger and raw fear. His denials grew louder, more agitated, his voice rising to a near shout. No, I didn't, She came at me. She was yelling about the money, about me. She pushed me. I just reacted, the words torn from him in a raw, desperate outburst, inadvertently confrontation, even as he twisted it into an act of self-defense, a final desperate attempt to shift blame. The courtroom held its collective breath, witnessing the full, chilling extent of his deceptive nature, cornered and brutally exposed, his lies utterly undone by the truth he had tried so hard to bury. The air in the courtroom, on the day the jury returned, felt impossibly heavy, thick with the collective anticipation that had slowly built over weeks of intense testimony. Every eye converged on the jury box, a silent, almost primal energy emanating from the assembled spectators, the Jenkins family, and Mark Peterson himself. Emily and David Jenkins sat rigidly in the front row, Their hands clasped their faces, etched with a profound weariness that transcended physical exhaustion, reflecting years of an unimaginable pain. Next to them, Detective Sergeant Laura Hayes and Detective Rob Miller watched their professional composure, a fragile mask over a quiet, hopeful tension. Mark Peterson, at the defense table, had lost the last vestiges of his earlier defiant swagger, replaced by a pale, twitching nervousness that betrayed his carefully constructed facade. The fate of Sarah Jenkins' memory and the future of her killer hung precariously in the balance. The bailiff's voice, usually a mere formality, resonated with solemn weight as the jury reached a verdict. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with a stern, unwavering gaze, rose to her feet. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." Collective gasp, a sound like a single, indrawn breath swept through the gallery. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, his posture reflecting the immense gravity of the moment. The clerk approached, took the folded verdict form, and handed it to the judge, who scanned it briefly, his expression unreadable, before passing it back to the clerk. The clerk's voice, clear and resonant, then broke the profound silence, reading the words that would forever define the outcome of the Jenkins family's long nightmare in the case of the state versus Mark Peterson. On the charge of first-degree murder, we, the jury, find the defendant, Mark Peterson, guilty. The single, stark word, guilty, reverberated through the hushed courtroom like a thunderclap. For a split second, an absolute stillness reigned, as if the entire world had held its breath. Then a profound wave of guttural emotion broke. Emily Jenkins buried her face in her father's shoulder, her body racked with shuddering sobs that were a complex tapestry of anguish, relief, and a bitter, hollow triumph. David Jenkins squeezed her tightly, his own eyes welling tears carving paths through the lines of grief on his face. This was not joy, but the crushing weight of justice finally met a heavy, painful vindication for a life brutally stolen. Across the aisle, whispers erupted, quickly shushed by the bailiffs, but the sheer emotional release was palpable. At the defense table, Mark Peterson's face, already pale, now crumpled entirely. His eyes, wide with disbelief and a sudden stark terror, stared blankly ahead, fixed on a point beyond the courtroom walls. He swayed slightly, as if struck by an invisible blow, the stark reality of his conviction crashing down upon him. He had spun his intricate web of lies, twisted his narratives, and attempted to manipulate truth, but in the end, the relentless logic of evidence and the collective judgment of 12 citizens had seen through his deception. The mask of the deceptive suspect had utterly fallen, revealing only profound, unadulterated fear. The judge, his gavel, striking the bench with a sharp, echoing crack, restored a fragile order. Order in the court. The jury is thanked and dismissed. He then addressed Mark Peterson directly, his voice firm and unwavering. "Mr. Peterson, you have been found guilty of first-degree murder. We will proceed to the sentencing phase. On date 2 weeks later." The words cold and procedural underscored the definitive end of Mark's denial and the chilling beginning of his reckoning. The sentencing phase, though legally distinct from the verdict, was inextricably linked in the emotional journey of Sarah's family. It served as the court's mechanism to determine appropriate punishment, but more crucially, it was an opportunity for the victims to speak, to transform their silent suffering into an audible, searing demand for justice. The atmosphere in the courtroom, while still solemn now, throbbed with an undercurrent of raw, exposed emotion. Emily Jenkins, representing her family, approached the stand to deliver her victim impact statement. She was a figure of determined grief, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a crumpled tissue and a piece of paper. As her name was called, she walked slowly, deliberately to the stand, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom landing for a long, agonizing moment on Mark Peterson. He refused to meet her eyes, staring straight ahead, a picture of sullen defiance. Emily took a deep, fortifying breath, her voice initially wavering, but quickly gaining strength, imbued with a fierce, unwavering resolve. My sister Sarah was everything good and bright in this world. She was sunshine. She was laughter. She was ambition. She had dreamed so many dreams that you, Mark, ripped away from her. From us. Tears streamed silently down her face, but her voice held steady, a testament to a profound strength forged in unimaginable pain. Every morning, I wake up, and for a split second, I forget. Then the reality crashes down, a cold, brutal wave. The reality that Sarah is gone. Because of you. She paused, her breath catching, but she pushed through her gaze, locking onto Mark Peterson's averted face. You lived in our home. You pretended to be a friend. You watched us search, you watched us cry, all while you knew exactly what you had done. You lied, you twisted, you tried to blame others. But the truth, just like Sarah's spirit, refused to stay buried. Her voice rose, filled with the righteous anger of a sister, demanding accountability for her beloved lost sibling. Mark Peterson, you took everything. You took her future. You took our peace. You took a part of our souls. Then, her voice hardening, carrying the collective weight of all who had loved Sarah, Emily delivered a statement that transcended the specific case, echoing the universal cry of victims' families everywhere. Her words were direct, accusatory, and aimed squarely at the man who had stolen her sister's life. Timothy Forrest Bass must never be allowed to walk the earth as a free person. The name Timothy Forrest Bass, a powerful, unshakable symbol of pure malevolence, rang through the courtroom, a testament to the raw, unfiltered fury and absolute demand for lifelong incarceration that can only come from a grieving family member looking directly at the face of evil. The specific name, though not Mark Peterson's, was irrelevant in that moment. It was the power of the declaration, the unyielding demand for justice against a perpetrator of unthinkable crime that resonated deeply within the hearts of all who bore witness. Following Emily's powerful testament, Mark Peterson was offered an opportunity to speak. He stood reluctantly, a flicker of his old, evasive persona returning to his features. His words were hollow, a performative apology devoid of genuine remorse, still attempting to subtly shift blame. I truly am sorry for the tragedy that occurred. I never intended for anyone to get hurt. It was an accident. I just wish things had gone differently. His refusal to take full responsibility, his continued minimization of his actions underscored the depths of his self-deception and stark lack of empathy, further solidifying the court's judgment. Finally, Judge Thompson delivered the sentence. His voice was somber, but firm, reflecting the immense weight of the court's authority and the community's demand for absolute justice. Mark Peterson, the judge, began, his eyes fixed on the defendant. You were entrusted with the safety and friendship of Sarah Jenkins. You shattered that trust, committing an act of unspeakable violence driven by selfishness and profound deceit. The overwhelming evidence presented, including your own digital footprints and your shifting fabricated accounts, paints a clear picture of premeditation and a deliberate attempt to conceal your heinous crime. Court has heard the profound impact of your actions on Sarah's family, a pain that will forever endure. He paused, letting the full gravity of his words sink in. Therefore, in the name of the state of Evergreen Heights, and for the murder of Sarah Jenkins, I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A collective sigh of profound relief rippled through the gallery. For Sarah's family, the judge's words, though delivered with a solemn finality, resonated with the deep satisfaction of knowing that Mark Peterson would pay the ultimate lifelong price for his heinous crime. The legal battle was over. Justice cold and unyielding had been served, but its arrival left an indelible mark on all it touched. In the aftermath of the verdict, a fragile quiet descended upon Evergreen Heights. The raw shock and tension that had gripped the community slowly began to recede, yielding to a hesitant return to daily rhythms. Yet beneath this veneer of renewed normalcy, the chilling shadow of Sarah Jenkins's murder persisted, a permanent scar etched onto the once unblemished facade of the town. Life, though it resumed its course, was irrevocably changed forever, marked by the insidious betrayal that had unfolded in their midst. Sarah's apartment, once a vibrant hub of youthful dreams, stood vacant for a time, a silent monument to what was lost. Eventually, new tenants would occupy the space, unaware of the tragedy that had once permeated its walls. But for those who knew Sarah, the rooms would always carry the faint echo of her absence. Her vibrant spirit, her infectious laughter, her boundless ambition, these were the memories that remained cherished and mourned, a stark reminder of the beautiful life brutally extinguished. She had dreamed of making a difference through her art, of exploring new horizons, of building a future rich with joy and connection. Mark Peterson had stolen all of it, reducing a limitless future to a tragic past. For Emily and David Jenkins, the finality of Mark Peterson's sentencing offered a measure of profound, if heartbreaking, solace. The grueling legal battle had concluded, the perpetrator held accountable. The scales of justice, though heavy with sorrow, had finally found their balance. Yet this relief was not a balm capable of healing their profound wounds. Rather, it was a stabilization against an unending tide of pain. Their lives, profoundly altered by Sarah's loss, could never fully recapture their former shape. The ache of her absence remained a constant companion, a void no verdict could ever truly fill. However, from the crucible of their grief, a powerful new purpose began to emerge. Emily, once consumed by the raw anguish of her sister's disappearance, discovered quiet, unyielding strength. Alongside David, she dedicated herself to ensuring Sarah's memory would be defined not solely by her violent end, but by the legacy of light and love she left behind. They channeled their enduring pain into active advocacy, working tirelessly with local organizations that supported victims of domestic violence and betrayal. Their efforts sought to educate, to empower, and to shed light on the subtle warning signs that can often be overlooked, signs that had perhaps been present unseen or unheeded in Sarah's own life. Through their tireless work, Sarah's name became synonymous not just with tragedy, but with a fierce, unwavering commitment to protect others from similar fates, transforming profound loss into a beacon of hope and prevention. In the quiet pursuit of truth, Evergreen Heights, and indeed the wider world, had borne witness to a chilling demonstration of how easily trust can be shattered, how deception can fester in the most familiar relationships. Yet the case also became a powerful testament to the relentless, often unseen efficacy of modern investigation. In an era where human words can be twisted and alibis fabricated with chilling precision, the digital world offers its own impartial narrative. Unseen digital footprints, meticulously tracked and analyzed, possess the undeniable capacity to expose the darkest corners of human behavior, unraveling the most intricate webs of lies. Mark Peterson's carefully constructed deceptions, his shifting narratives and feigned ignorance, ultimately crumbled under the irrefutable weight of his own technological trail. His phone, the very device he used to interact with the world, became the silent, compelling witness to his crime. For Sarah Jenkins, justice was ultimately served, a testament to the unwavering dedication of detectives like Laura Hayes and the enduring love of her family. And in the lingering shadow of her memory, a profound message resonated that some secrets, however deeply buried, cannot escape the persistent light of truth, leaving behind an undeniable legacy that forever demands accountability. The digital shadow of truth ultimately outlasts every lie. If the relentless pursuit of truth, often illuminated by unseen digital footprints, compels you, then subscribe to Shadow Files for more stories that bring justice to light. Don't forget to subscribe to Shadow Files and hit the notification bell.